Okay, everyone, welcome. Welcome to our webinar for Recovery for All. We're going to talk a bit about our budget strategy and a bit about an election strategy that we are cooking up, and we're going to get your thoughts and opinions. We got a number of polls and things that we'll be running, so stay tuned for that. So just to lead off, welcome everyone. Here's the agenda for our call today. I'll just do a brief introduction, then I'll turn it over to the brains of the outfit, Mr. Zane Velji, who will talk about our budget strategy. So we're in a really interesting period now, just before a federal budget is expected to announce a budget that is expected to focus on recovery from the pandemic. We'll talk a bit about our strategy development and our thoughts on how we might participate in an election campaign. And we are going to hear from all of you, and then we will wrap. We've got a pretty big audience today. About 270 folks have registered. So everyone is muted. Please feel free to use the chat to offer suggestions, comments, ideas, to say hello, talk to your peers, let us know where you're from, share your opinions. Please keep it PG, though, but so far everybody has. Also, use the Q&A. So if there's a Q&A tab on your control panel, if you have a question you would like to ask Zane or myself, please feel free to put the questions in there. It's easier for us to follow the questions if they're in the Q&A than in the chat. And we'll be running a few polls during the webinar, as I mentioned, to ask for your advice. So here's where we are. As you know, today is the anniversary, 1 year anniversary, and hopefully the last anniversary of this pandemic being declared. A lot has happened over the last year in the homelessness world, as you will all know all too well. But the Recovery for All campaign was launched in May of 2020, very shortly after the pandemic, for a few reasons. One is, we know that homelessness in Canada, modern mass homelessness in Canada, was created by policy. Straight up, it was created by policy. We know that. We also know that this pandemic has put people experiencing homelessness at terrible risk. You know, people experiencing homelessness are 3 times more likely to catch COVID, 20 times more likely to need hospitalization, 10 times more likely to need ICU, and 5 times more likely to die within 21 days of a diagnosis. So we know that we have to respond urgently. And throughout the pandemic, we've heard people say, well, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. Well, Recovery for All is frankly making a statement that we can't go back to normal. Normal was a place when 235,000 people experiencing homelessness in a year were at life-threatening risk for no other reason than they don't have a home. And crises like this create windows of opportunity for significant change. Governments think and act differently. Societies begin to reevaluate how we function, how we treat each other. We see fissures in our societies, in our communities exposed. And Recovery for All is really focused on addressing the public policy roots of this crisis and making sure that we leave this crisis with a commitment to eliminate homelessness in Canada, and are propelled forward in that effort. So we launched Recovery for All in May of 2020. The website, a 6-point plan. You saw we did a report on that, fully costed our proposals, and ran a poll that showed Canadians overwhelmingly supported urgent action on homelessness and investments in affordable housing as part of our recovery effort. In that, all of you, frankly, not us, all of you who have signed up to Recovery for All, who have sent cards and letters over the last year, pushed the federal government to make a commitment to ending chronic homelessness in the speech of the throne on September 23rd. In order to get there, since we launched Recovery for All, there's been 22,000 plus supporters have joined us, and over 700,000 letters have been sent. There was an economic statement in the fall. There was an appointment of the National Housing Council. And we started developing a campaign school. We were running a campaign school with 100 or 115 or so of you joining in. But now we're in a really important spot. So the federal government has made a commitment to ending chronic homelessness, but now they have to put their money where their mouth is. A promise without the budget to implement it, or at least a down payment on that commitment, isn't worth the paper that it's written on. So our focus right now is on that spring budget. So they're talking about $100 billion or so in stimulus spending. Longer-term investment. We are looking for a longer-term investment aligned with the goal of ending homelessness and our 6-point plan. And we want to see that there's a federal strategy, or the beginnings of a federal strategy for ending chronic homelessness. And of course, if the rumor mills are to be believed, we've got a federal election coming. Could be soon, could be sooner, could be later. Now, I want to move on to the next slide. Let's talk about some numbers. So we have our 6-point plan. We estimate that that plan, if implemented, would save taxpayers $18 billion. We're calling for 300,000, at least 300,000 new units of affordable and supportive housing, on top of several other things. We believe that that investment would create over 500,000 jobs. So, the federal government is thinking about recovery and thinking about stimulus and thinking about correcting some of the problems that have been presented during the pandemic. This is a very good way to create jobs and solve some problems. We know that over 70% of Canadians believe that solving homelessness is an urgent issue, and 84% of Canadians want more investment in affordable housing as part of that recovery effort. But I looked this up the other day. There are over 6,000 registered lobbyists in Ottawa. The Hill Times ran a story a little while ago about the top 100 lobbyists in Ottawa, and they're professional lobbying organizations, companies. They are large corporations. All of them, all 6,000 of these people, are all pushing the federal government for different things in this budget. And we are one voice among those. We are one of those registered lobbyists, right? And we've got a real David and Goliath struggle ahead of us. If we want to move the needle on ending homelessness, we are competing against 6,000 others that are 6,000 other organizations and companies and more that are pushing similarly for these kind of investments. But we have a competitive advantage. We have an advantage over most, if not all of them. And that is all of you. That is our big competitive advantage, because if we believe that if we can mobilize Canadians to support ending homelessness and investments in housing, we have an advantage over those others who are calling for other things to be in the budget. Not to say that our pitch or what we're looking for out of the budget should happen at the exclusion of anybody else, but that our pitch should be included in the budget with everyone else and the priorities of the government. So we have, without question, an uphill climb. And so today we're going to talk a bit about our thoughts on what we do over the next month or so before a federal budget expected probably in April, perhaps early May, but probably in April. But then we have to think ahead, right? After this budget, I've been around government a long time, and no matter how hard you pitch or how hard you do, you generally don't get everything you want, and you don't get everything you need. And so you got to keep pushing. The other important thing is, going back to the first point I made this morning, homelessness was created by policy. In order to move policy and it compete with 6,000 plus registered lobbyists, we have to engage in the political process. And we are thinking about a strategy to engage in the federal election so that we don't go back to normal. We never are in a position again where it is easy to cut those things that support people who are at risk of or experiencing homelessness, so that we reverse the policies that created this problem in the first place, and we make sure never again are we in a position like we were in the late 80s and early 90s. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Zane. I'm going to stop share and let him drive, and he will go over some of our thinking on on budget and elections strategy. Over to you, Zane.
Thank you so much, Tim. Good morning / good afternoon, everyone. So exciting to be with you all again. If those of you on the call have heard me before, you'll see I've seen this part of the slide deck that we presented in the past, but I have to impress upon you, it is even more important now because of what Tim just outlined. The David and Goliath fight that we have in front of us, this ability that we have, this unique advantage that we have with all of us in the room on this call and the 20,000 other supporters that want to ensure that we use policy and advocacy to ensure that homelessness is solved in this country once and for all is very, very exciting. So I want to take you through a couple of things. I want to take you through our overall strategy. It's very simple. It's called people power. It's literally this concept that says what we don't have in high-moneyed resources and advertising and glossy lobbying efforts, we have with a passionate, enthusiastic group of people who want to move things along. And here's the secret. Government at this moment in time, as much as it responds to the big and the flashy, it also needs to respond to everyday people. Because at the end of the day, what they're in it for is the votes. They're in it to ensure they get reelected so they can pass their policy agenda. So if we showcase broadly and more specifically related to the budget, if we start showcasing that we are the voice of everyday Canadians, that we are the voice of what that appetite for your neighbors, your friends, and your family is through what we care about, that's what we have an advantage for government to respond to. So as much as it might be folks, with suits in Ottawa, telling the government, here's what you need to do because this is what my client wants, we're the opposite of that. We're a group of Canadians from a grassroots level saying, we may not have the high priced whatever, but we're putting our hand up and saying, this is what we want. This is what we care about. And that's what's so exciting to me and is what's at the root of our strategy. So let me take you through the basic strategy and then let me focus on budget. So on the basic strategy, I'm going backwards and you get to see that all again. 1 second here. This is just a reminder. On the basic strategy, I like to start with this quote from FDR, American president. I agree with you. I want to do it. Now make me do it. This is the voices of everyday people that are now coming together and are going to push this thing along. But there's 4 distinct elements to this that I think we have to understand. Number 1, you have a voice. Many of you on this call have already demonstrated that voice in various ways, sending letters, joining this campaign. But the biggest thing is that we have a voice and the government wants to hear that voice. Number 2, you have influence. You have more influence than you even realize and perhaps even know, which is you're not an Instagram influencer, although there might be a few of you on this call, but you're an influence to the people in your circle, your friends, your family. So not only do you have a voice, you have influence around those around you, which is extremely powerful because that's the building block of trying to create change. Number 3, you have networks. Not only do you have those around you, you have the networks that extend beyond that. And number 4, you represent what decision makers care about. So let me take what I said earlier and reconstruct that. Governments are now looking to hear from what the electorate wants as they head into a potential election and a potential budget. We, as individuals who are disproportionately engaged in this cause, have that voice because we represent broader community. We also have friends, family, and we have networks. If we put our ability and our organizing capacity to those around us, we actually have a much more disproportionate voice to be able to influence government about what they care about, which is what everyday Canadians want. And we know that we want housing and we want to end homelessness in this country once and for all, and they need to hear that from us. And frankly, they have been. And this is what you've been able to do. We launched this campaign and we trended in the entire country. We put out a 6-point plan, as Tim mentioned. We put out a report that said it'll save us $18 billion if we end homelessness rather than tinker around the edges and manage it. You've helped us to indicate that it's not just you, but you're representative of more than 70% of Canadians who want to urgently end homelessness and more than 80% of Canadians who want more affordable housing. So not only are you here as disproportionately passionate individuals, you are actually representative of your country, of your fellow citizens in terms of your wants, needs, and desires. That's super important. And then you've had 22,000 folks kind of join, yourselves included, our campaign. We've started 32 letter writing campaigns. Our entire campaign strategy has been, can we put out stuff and create the infrastructure so that you can be as supporters and individuals engaged with our cause, be the disproportionately engaged folks to tell government what we want and how we get there. And you've sent over 700,000 letters to Ottawa. That's a staggering amount. 700,000 letters have reached inboxes of people who hold the controls and the levers of power in this country on the thing that we care about, housing and ending homelessness. That's incredible. And they've responded. They've said that advocacy has been a reason that ending chronic homelessness or elimination of chronic homelessness is on the agenda. But we know we can't stop there because the commitment is only so strong. You've also viewed more than 1.5 million videos and shared those widely amongst your networks, which kind of leads us to this milestone. As much as that speech from the throne was a milestone for us, we now have another milestone, which is this budget. This budget that is coming up in the next month or so is going to be the moment where we get to realize whether the government wants to put their money where their mouth is, whether they want to put their money in April in terms of what they committed back in September. And this will give us a good sense. It won't give us everything, but it'll give us a good sense of where we are in this David and Goliath battle. And here's what we're thinking we need to do. Our goal is very simple. We need to ensure that housing is a key part of this budget. And more importantly, we need the government to recognize that with a dollar amount, with a down payment. And that down payment sits roughly in the neighborhood of about 4.7 billion. And what we need is that this is the start of the money that is required to make their commitment, right? Through our advocacy, we've helped doing it as well as other groups, but their commitment to eliminate chronic homelessness now needs a dollar figure associated with it. So that's the challenge we're up for. This is the biggest fight we've been in this campaign thus far. And this is what we think we need to do. We need to showcase that our case is still very strong, that the 6 points that we have are tested, that the money that can be saved makes sense, and that the public opinion is still very strong. We need to be top of mind of federal decision makers. Tim talked about it, 6,193. That number is etched in my mind because that is the amount of people that are lobbying for different causes, many people competing for the same attention span. We need to be there as well. And so we need to keep ourselves top of mind. The way we do that, we deploy our supporters and our people power, and we showcase that voters want this, that we're not just a fringe group of 113 people on a webinar or even 20,000 people in a supporter base, but we're actually representative of our fellow Canadians. And the numbers thus far indicate that we're perhaps more engaged than our friends, family, and neighbors, but it's only a matter of time until they join the fold in some way, but that we're still representative of their values. And that's what we're going to try to show. That we might be the more engaged folks, so we're the ones sending you letters and we're the ones making phone calls, but do not make any mistake about it. We represent everyone that we know in our community and our friends, our family. We speak with that voice. So that's what's really exciting about this people power opportunity. So here's what we want to do in the budget as we lead in the next month. So here's what you'll see from us as we move forward. And this is where we'd love your feedback, because I'm going to list a few tactics for you. And I'd love to get your sense, and we'll run a few polls about it. But in the chat, in the Q&A, other suggestions, more than welcome. That's the purpose of this. We're going to send more letters. We're going to send more letters to government, and we're going to send them to the ministers and the decision makers that matter and that have the throttles on power. We can't stop that. It's a runaway train in some sense where we know that government cares about that they've responded to it. And we know that you've been so gracious with your time and energy and advocacy to help us get there. We're going to send more letters, even more so as we lead up to this upcoming budget. We know so many of the decisions that are going to be made in this budget with numbers that they're playing that are so big, might be rounding errors for them, but will be huge numbers and huge impact driven metrics for us. So we need to ensure that the public is still on side, and i.e. we are still engaged in this fight. Number two, we're going to add phone calls to the list. We've experimented with this a bit, but we want to have more and more people making phone calls. Here's the hard part about phone calls. They're daunting. Here's the easy part about the phone calls. Once you get through one, you realize how easy it is. And we've partnered with a tool called New Mode, which is now allowing us to make phone calls incredibly simply and very easily. And often you're just leaving a voicemail on your MP's voicemail box. But the way we do it is super simple. And what we know is that the impact of a phone call, even a voicemail, is so powerful. To have someone from someone's riding and constituency hear from them makes it really, really easy. So over the course of the next couple of weeks, we'll roll out more phone call asks. And we ask you that, yes, it might seem a little daunting, but trust us, if you make the first voicemail or first phone call, it becomes super, super easy. We give you the script, make it very, very simple to make that phone call. We'll start texting. In that case, we'll start texting you to do various actions, to bring yourself into the fold, and we'll also broadcast text to people at large. We want to do that because we know we want to gain more momentum in this moment in time. Tweets. We know that Twitter has been a tool that we've been using, but we now are going to ask you even more than we have before to send tweets to your MP and to those in government. We know that many MPs respond faster to their Twitter account than they do to their emails and their phones. And we know that because Twitter's a public medium. People can see when you're tweeting a specific MP or your prime minister or whatnot. We want to take advantage of that and try to ensure that we get that into the fold. We're going to try to get some op-eds. We've got an op-ed strategy with New Mode that allows folks to crowdsource op-eds, and we're going to try to get as many of those as we can over the course of the next couple of, next 6 weeks or so, to ensure that we are still top of mind. Advertising. We might go back to some advertising to ensure that not only is it this group of 20,000, but we bring new people into the fold and talk to them about the importance of what's happening right now. I mean, this is such a critical moment, not just for our campaign, but for the country. This budget, and I don't mean to overstate this, could have ramifications, trajectory-like ramifications in terms of what it means for this country, what direction we're in, and frankly, how much of the promise that Prime Minister Trudeau has made around remaking the country actually comes through with quantifiable dollars, cents, and numbers. So that's going to be a huge part of this as well. And finally, we're going to go back to the poll. We're going to go back to figure out what our fellow Canadians believe. One thing is very interesting. While many people might feel like this pandemic is over, what does it mean about the pandemic when we're off government stimulus, when we're off this sort of this element of pandemic period and are now in recovery period, when we see the dust settle and see how great it might be for some, but how bad and worse it is for so many more? We want to figure out what our fellow Canadians think in a more updated fashion, and we're going to be doing that as part of our budget strategy here as well. So I've thrown a bunch of tactics out to you about what we want to do. This is our plan. We want to have a message that makes us top of mind. We want to have leverage more people power. We want to ensure that our ask is something that they have a easy understanding of the down payment that's necessary in a simplified way. And we want to actually leverage new tools or expand upon some of the tools that we've had before. What I'm saying in simple form is that we're on a 6-week sprint. Think of today as a sprint to the budget. We're next 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to roll out more tools, more strategies, more activity, but we know we're against a milestone that's going to be so important in this collective fight that we're on. So the next part of this is our update on campaign 2021. Tim, I don't see you there, but if you're still around on camera, I might ask you to kind of walk through that. There you are, wonderful. I might just ask you to kind of walk through, I'll park budget, and what I'll say is, if you've got additional questions or chat conversations about tactics you've heard, please throw them in, folks. We'll address them just after the tail end of Tim's presentation. But we also wanted to simultaneously give you an update on what happens beyond budget. And so I'll move it to the next slide here, where we kind of have the goals that Tim can outline, and then I'll jump you through what those look like, and then we'll kind of have a combined discussion, everyone, on both budget as well as our future campaign plan. So Tim, over to you there.
Well, like I said, the homelessness and our housing crisis are man-made, and I say man deliberately. They're man-made crises that is 30 years, that happened over 30 years ago when the federal government decided to withdraw from affordable housing investment and cut transfers to provinces and people for welfare, healthcare, and those sorts of things. We are looking at bringing together we are bringing together a coalition of our peers, including Co-op Housing Federation, Canadian Housing Renewal Association, and probably a few others. And we're going to attempt the largest housing sector campaign ever. And we want to go beyond what typically happens in election campaigns. So typically, in campaigns, you'll have organizations like ours and others will maybe organize a national debate, or we'll put up a website and we'll do some kind of the social media or digital-led type advocacy efforts. We're planning to go one step further, and we're planning to go into basically we want this coalition in our campaign to think, enact, and work like a political party during an election campaign. And we're going to complement all those digital strategies with a on-the-ground riding level campaign targeting 70 swing ridings. There's 360 plus ridings in the House of Commons. There's probably 70-ish that may switch sides or could switch sides and change government or not in the election. Those ridings are around Montreal, in Quebec, they're in Ontario, largely around the GTA, southeastern Ontario, and in British Columbia, mostly concentrated around Metro Vancouver. And we are going to be going for online and offline engagement. So Zane's going to walk you through some of those tactics. But what we're going to try and organize is a national housing sector campaign. And our hope is to engage some of that 36% of Canadians who are who either have been homeless themselves or know somebody who has, to the 250,000 co-op housing members nationwide, to all of the social housing providers and tenants in that social housing, everybody that has some connection to housing. Like, what I'm trying to convey, I think, is that there's this huge block of people that are touched by this issue. And if that block of people can be mobilized, we can put our thumb on the scale of elections. And more importantly, we can make sure that all parties will recognize the housing sector as a movement and a body of voters that they have no choice but to address, and that they know that they have to have housing in their platforms in order to win the election. And just to be super clear, we're not partisan. We're not going to be, weighing in favor of one party or another. We want to make sure all parties have housing and ending homelessness at the top of their policy agenda. Zane, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. So that's our goal. Audacious, bold, big, but in fact, what we'd say necessary. Right? Necessary to Tim's point, if politics and policy is what got us into this position where we see the levels and the rates of homelessness, it's going to be us engaging in that manner to reverse that. It's going to be us engaging in that manner to ensure that the agenda of austerity budgets never enters the fray, that we look after one another, that we ensure that these basic needs that we are talking about, and they should be that, are met through advocacy and through the voices of our fellow Canadians. So we've got a big plan for what happens with Recovery for All and how we transition to this multi-partnership, unique reach, targeted campaign. Let me talk to you about not all the tactics, because I could spend hours doing that. Let me talk about three things that I think are really interesting and perhaps different that we're going to do than what we have done from Recovery for All. The first one, volunteering. And I mean volunteering online and offline. Let me talk about both. Online, our goal is to build a coalition of people, regardless of where you live, who are able to do engagement and influencer-like tasks for us online. We know that this conversation is we're going to be drowned out. Let me be totally clear. With advertising money from other organizations, with other organizations and their lobbyists, louder voices, glossier voices. This goes back to people power. We're going to try to have some of that good creative, hopefully videos that can catch the attention and the consciousness of the larger population. But what we know is if we can build an online community, an online group of people who'd say, I'm willing to volunteer a couple of hours, contribute my time, to post on social media, to text friends and family, to text bank, to phone bank, all from the comfort of my home, that's incredible. We know that that is going to have more power, enthusiasm, and an impact than outright advertising dollars and glossy TV ads, which we know that are going to be the same group, the same sort of strategies that others are going to compete for that same attention. The second part of volunteering, in your community. We're going to try to do what political parties do, and in certain parts of the country are going to try to erect ground games, what we call field campaigns, knocking on doors, helping with lawn signs, helping drop literature, talking to friends and family, helping to arrange a town hall in your community. A lot of this is going to be asterisks with where we are with the pandemic, coupled with where the election is, but we've got plans and ambitions to have a field game as part of this. So volunteering is going to be a big part of it, and we'll talk to you about that in a second and try to suss out some intent for volunteering. Secondly, relational organizing. This is the big philosophy of people power, and we're going to double down on it even more. Online and offline, we know that the way things move is not with top-down messages, but with your ability to talk to your friends, your family, influence one another. And we're going to create tools online as well as a structure offline that allow you to do that, that allow you to talk to people that are like-minded, that allow you to engage friends and family, that give you perhaps an inside track of what we're up to. We want to do that in a way that we haven't yet, because what we know and what we've learned thus far is out of our 20,000 supporters, we've got a large portion of them that are engaged. I mean, there's over 100 of you on this webinar today just to hear about what we're doing on a budget. That's amazing to us. And then we've got thousands who are kind of joining us and doing actions online. We want you to be in the same community. We want you to feed off each other's energy, enthusiasm, passion. We know there's something here, and we know that that core is your energy. So we're going to try to facilitate a way to make that possible and to make that a big part of our strategy. And the final thing is, we're not going to just sit on the sidelines. As much as we're, as it relates to voting, as much as it is a nonpartisan exercise, it's not an apolitical exercise. I want to make sure we're clear, right? We are going to be encouraging folks to pledge to vote, to say that, hey, you know what? Housing is important to me, not just for me, but for the community around me. It's something we need to have on the agenda, on the ballot. It needs to be something my MPs hear about. So we're going to create a way that happens through our lawn signs, through our pledges, and a plan for what we call GOTV, getting out the vote. A plan that allows us to ensure that when campaigns are mobilizing folks, that housing is top of mind. So we're going to try our best. Once again, I mean, that David and Goliath metaphor extends to this, but we know we need to do it in order for us to have a chance to ensure our issues are on the agenda, and to ensure that those that are running for office know how much, can actually have the quantifiable numbers that the polling has indicated, that your enthusiasm and support has indicated at the doors and in their community, to say people care about this issue. So those are a few of the things that we're going to do that are in addition to the digital stuff. You'll expect more videos from us, probably virtual rallies, probably expect a few additional tweaks to the brand and the website when the partnership grows. So a lot of excitement that we can't wait to share with you as we move forward. But that's our plan for both this budget and the upcoming campaign. So I'm perhaps going to stop sharing my screen so I can see Tim in larger view, but also more importantly, have access to the chat function and the throttles. So what I'll do is, in fact, I'll throw out a poll to everyone right now just to respond to. And this is about the budget strategy. I wanted to see if we've got the right budget strategy, what you want to see more of, what you want to see less of. So I'll launch this poll, and I'd love to get your thoughts this way. And then Tim, while folks are responding to the poll, maybe you and I can kind of look through some of the chat function and the questions that come up and kind of freeform there. And please, sure, folks, if you've got additional questions, comments, thoughts around what we should do, would be more than happy to take them at the time.
Yeah, so there's a few questions coming in. Maybe I'll direct them to you. One is from Michael. He's saying, what's our role if we aren't in a swing riding?
Oh, excellent question, Michael. Your role is twofold. Number one, your digital engagement and enthusiasm still very, very much welcome, right? So sending letters, doing the stuff on social media, putting all that stuff in place, like incredibly, incredibly helpful for us as we go forward, like very, very helpful. Secondly, you can always join our digital coalition, our digital community. In fact, that's not even specific to the riding that you live in. It's about trying to convince those in and around your network. And we're going to need that, right? A lot of that is, you know, the swing ridings will matter because they'll what tip the election in a certain way. And frankly, that's the ridings that the political parties will care about. But if we convert people and have folks that are looking to tell their friends and family about why they care about housing, why they care about ending homelessness, you've got disproportionate influence on them. So what we want to do is create a structure digitally. So you join our digital community, and you then go out to your friends, family, text bank, phone bank, help us with these iterative events that also reach out to folks that are folks you know, but also those in community at large. So there's much to do and much to sign up for as you, even if you don't live in a swing riding per se.
Okay. Another question from Joan is asking what will be the difference in approach party to party, and I think Joan's calling in from Alberta, and you can jump in here, Zane. But I think I'd answer one of the things we're exploring right now is doing a bit of polling near the beginning, after the budget and before the campaign, to try and understand the voter. Each party is after a group of voters, right, in order to attract them, the swing voters that they're trying to reach. And one of the tactics we're considering is running a poll and then testing messages and then giving each of the parties a package of information that says, look, if you want to attract a voter, like, this is how housing can be a vote winner for you. If you talk about housing this way, these voters will be drawn to your campaign. And we do that for all of the parties, right? So we're still nonpartisan, but we show them how they can use housing to attract voters. And so that's how we'll probably nuance a bit party by party. We may also do things like candidate surveys, those sort of tactics where we're asking each of the parties their views. And that certainly is a form of communication sort of up through the campaign infrastructure. Zane, did you want to jump in there?
I think that's absolutely right, Tim. You know, it's this ability to say, here's how housing and this policy that we're calling for, of this broad policy of ending homelessness in this country, here's how that could move votes for you. But what we also want to do is arm those that are in community, yourselves, that are talking to government, that are talking to candidates, that are talking to folks online, over the phone, through text banking, through all these tactics. We want to arm you with those numbers too, because our hope is that those numbers are strong, they're solid, they hold, if not get better from what we've seen in the summer, and that we keep reinforcing that while we are the most engaged group on this issue, oh no, we are not the only people who care about this issue. And I think that's part of our key message, right? That we are representative of a broader, larger group of folks who want this outcome. So we want to empower you with those numbers as well. So I'm going to end this poll here. Thanks so much for answering these questions, folks. I'm seeing a lot of comments on videos and people saying same for emails. I agree. I'll share these results with you so you can see those right now, everyone. And right strategy in place, so some confidence around our budget strategy. And I'm also seeing some additional ideas, Tim, while I was speaking. I think a few folks inserted some additional ideas or comments there. So excellent. Thank you so much for that one. I'm going to launch another poll in a second here, but Tim, is there another question for us to bet on?
Yeah, no, Mark has emailed a few questions earlier, and I know he's having a bit of trouble typing in questions into the thing. So I've got a few questions and comments from Mark. He's saying, can we explain in this budget that supportive housing can be done in various ways? Yes, that's certainly been part of the ongoing conversation we have been having in Ottawa, and really focusing them on one of the things we've talked about, especially with the RFI and the RHI, the Rapid Housing Initiative, is that there needs to be custom built and designed supportive housing that is tailored to the unique needs of people in different communities. And so the RHI is great, but we have to start actually building purpose-built supportive housing so that it's tailored. Mark is also asking, in light of supportive living being done in different ways, can we push for a national direct funding program? Direct funding, he says, is a program that gives people with disabilities control to direct their lives independently, e.g. hiring their own staff. Now, I don't know, Mark, if this is separate from like a basic income conversation, which we've absolutely supported, or enhancements to the Canada Housing Benefit, which we've also supported, which puts cash into people's hands. It is worth noting in the speech from the throne, the same one in September, they did talk about a national disability, disability benefit. And I don't know if that's quite the same thing. And last point you made, with the lived experience leadership training he's been taking, we've talked about working as individuals, recruiting our own volunteers, and focusing on a local campaign. And he says, in my experience, if you come from a smaller town, there are avenues for people to speak up. How can we help each other campaign on a larger national scale to address systemic issues? I don't know, maybe Zane, you want to talk about how we'll bring the different volunteers and groups together?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. I mean, we know that we can't do this alone, and we know there's many allied organizations, while they may not be speaking about housing directly, that we know that there is a simpatico relationship with. We have to ensure that, you know, whether that's Indigenous groups of Rural Remote, which is a network partner of CAH, or whether that's the larger BIPOC community and the needs that those communities are calling for, that we partner with them. And so, you know, one of the things that we found very interesting as part of Recovery for All is the tie-in that housing has to so many additional things, if I can say it so simply, right? Healthcare, income, social supports, community relations, mental health. It is, I wouldn't say, you know, to not offend it, that it's the central sort of tenet, but for many things, it's very much connective tissue. And so we know that that kind of gives us an opportunity to bring in even small weekly partnerships. If you can think of our process to bring in, say, a health group or a group of doctors. We had some university medical students reach out to us. We've done work with CNH3 on, you know, ensuring that we vaccinate the homeless population, or those experiencing homelessness first. So it's those sort of partnerships, those iterative partnerships, alongside the fact that, you know, they endorse and come along for the ride, that makes this so much more stronger, because we're not only then just saying this is a group of housing sector advocates or those in this, but this is a central tenet or a connective tissue between all these other things that the public, but also this government really does care about.
Did you want to run your next poll, Zane?
I did. I was going to, thanks, Jim. I was going to jump in a poll for new tactics. So, you know, someone I see in the chat here has mentioned lawn signs. Yes, indeed, we want to do lawn signs. So I've thrown out a few other tactics here that we're thinking about. Some of them I've mentioned, some of them I have not. I'd love to get the group's thoughts on, should we do it? We've got 1 to 5 of no, don't do it at all. Leave me alone. Don't do that. Or yes, we should certainly do it. If you were on our last conversation where we had our guest Olivia Chow join us, we asked a few of these questions as well. Knowing that there might be some new folks on here, I wanted to ask a few of these questions. What would you want to see as we move into this partnership, what we call the most ambitious sort of campaign that we're running? What would you want to see? Is it stuff that you see here? If it's not, please type it into the chat. What do you want to see going forward? But I'd love to stress test some of our initial ideas here for the new campaign. So I'll leave that poll open as folks respond to it. I'm also seeing additional items that came through while I was speaking. I saw flash mobs and lawn signs and what other organizations have done. So really, really appreciate some of that additional commentary and feedback. Oh, Tim, I've lost you. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. While folks are answering that poll, there's a couple of questions here that have come in. And I think there's a few sort of on the theme we're talking about. Giovanna is asking, do you see any opportunity to nuance the plan to harness sectors, so representing the national architecture community, embedding the role of architects will help us as an organization engage our large community. So yeah, absolutely. So what's going to likely happen is we'll have the budget. That'll tell us how much of or any of the RFA 6-point plan that they have adopted. We are probably going to then sunset the Recovery for All and begin this new election campaign, because we're bringing together a coalition and because it is focused on election campaign. The policy ask is likely to be at a higher level, right? So voting to support investments in housing and ending homelessness, but that's also done deliberately so we can bring more people together, right? And so the less specific and itemized your request may be, or the policy proposals may be, the more we can bring people together. So we certainly see that happening for the election. Zane, there's a person named Wilson is saying that they're keen to volunteer. They're in Alberta here. And he's wondering if there's going to be an information pack available that repeats the materials we're seeing. Maybe you want to talk a bit about, like, leading into the campaign, how we would support and engage volunteers on the ground to run their own campaigns or to be involved in this one.
Absolutely. I love that Wilson's just prepping me for what's coming next, which is our volunteer question. So first of all, thank you, Wilson, for putting your hand up and agreeing to want to volunteer. That's really, really excellent and exciting news. Here's what we're thinking of doing as we kind of move through this phase into this this new campaign, or this election specific campaign, I should say. So as we sunset RFA, we're still collecting intent for those who want to volunteer and be part of this action team, both on the digital and ground game side. And I'll ask that question more explicitly in a second to this group. What we're going to do in the meantime is bridge it in a few ways. So we're going to start testing out a few of the things. The first thing we want to test out is that relational organizing. We want to get folks that are like-minded and want to contribute in the same group together. So shortly you'll see, and perhaps even today with the follow-up email, our new Facebook group that we're going to launch. We're going to start there. A Facebook group of folks that are like-minded, that want to interact with each other, that want to meet each other, that want to push this agenda along. That'll be a start of it. We'll then start testing various sort of trainings for volunteers as we kind of move through, both split on tactics, but also whether you're wanting to be specifically online or offline. We'll do a high-level training for folks and then walk through the tools that we plan to use for training. So we'll capture that intent, and we'll try to get you to go through a training so there's no sort of fear about what you're doing. How we show you how easy it is. We walk you through the tools that we're going to be using, whether that be text banking online, reaching out to friends and family, doing a phone bank, or as we move into the more self-organizing of your own community, right? How to reach out to friends and family, what does that look like? How to reach out to your neighbors, what does that look like? Or how to, if you've got the appetite and ambition, how to self-organize in your community by maybe hosting an event or a town hall or a debate. So we'll walk through all these elements as we move forward in the coming weeks and months. So Wilson, really appreciate you wanting to volunteer. That's our rough sketch of our plan as we move through one side of the campaign to the next, as we become more election focused. Right now, our real key focus in the interim 4 weeks is this budget, is to keep ensuring we have the advocacy and the digital asks available and people energized for that, and then we'll make that shift very quickly, almost in an overlapping fashion with some of these other opportunities.
Yeah, so if we got a few quick questions here, Zane, maybe we'll touch on if you wanted to just before. Please. Do you want to go through the results of the poll first?
I was just going to share this, so yeah. If you don't mind, and then if we can hit the other questions, Tim.
Yeah.
This is our improv style that we're doing, just jumping in and out. So a couple of really interesting answers here. So on campaign text messages, people landing at a 4 out of 5. On virtual rallies, more of that. Calling politicians, okay, that's a greater appetite than I expected from folks. So I appreciate people being a yes on that. And I'm assuming everyone can see this. That is why I'm running through these. Okay, perfect. On lawn signs,
we'll be expecting those 31 people to be making a lot of phone calls then.
Yeah, that's right, disproportionately. And then they bring in their friends and family, and that's what people power is. Look at that. Lawn signs, fantastic. Street teams, okay. Hearing interesting appetite. Virtual town halls, virtual Zoom parties, radio advertising, more of that, okay. So landing at a pretty good spot with some of these really, really interesting and helpful feedback. This may seem incredibly trivial, but for us, incredibly helpful as we plan through, because we've got so many options as to what to think about. So to narrow it in as to knowing, A, what's going to be effective, not just for the politicians, but for a campaign, and then B, to know the general appetite that folks have is really, really helpful to us. So thank you so much for sharing that insight. Tim, let's go in with another question, and then I'll do my final poll in a couple of minutes here.
Right. So Pauline is asking, what's the strategy to engage people with lived experience into this process, including policy development? So we have a couple of things, Pauline. One is we're going to be reaching out to lived experience, folks with lived experience, both directly trying to recruit people through Facebook. A lot of this is sort of relationship networking. So we're also working with organizations and groups of people with lived experience. So, the Canadian Lived Experience Leadership Network and some of our allied networks that have members that have lived experience, but that's really an important part of the process. And in the development of the 6-point plan back in May, we did engage with folks with lived experience through those networks to help advise and sort of feed into the policy process. I don't know, Zane, if you have anything else you want to add, but I think one of the things that I think it's going to be really key to engage people with lived experience, because that's a very large group of people. Like 1.6 million Canadians have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives. That's a hell of a lot of people. Imagine if even a portion of those people were engaged in a campaign like this. I mean, it'll be really, really important to bring them in. I don't know, Zane,
no, nothing to add, Tim.
Yeah.
I think that was really, really well summarized.
Sorry, I'm just, Letitia is asking, sorry if I mispronounced that, your name. In what level is the campaign pushing for capacity building within the sector, including more money to pay for structure needed to run housing facilities, those sorts of things? A key part of our campaign, our 6-point plan, is an expansion of Reaching Home, which is that capacity. Which is that capacity money for sure. But definitely, I think we need to be thinking about how exactly we're going to be building all of this housing and who's going to be doing that building. That definitely been raised. That has definitely been raised with folks in CMHC and Employment Social Development. Thomas is asking, do we have the resources or the money to engage the people who have mobile signs or trucks with flatbed trucks that we could mobilize with a tiny home? We actually interestingly had a billboard company come forward and donate some billboards. But we are, as Zane mentioned earlier, a guerrilla campaign in many ways. Like we don't have the big money, millions of dollars to put into signs. And so signs and some of that traditional stuff you see during a campaign. So if communities can find people who are willing to give those things, contribute those things, that would be amazing. But it's really going to come down to some of that grassroots effort. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through the questions.
Well, Tim, while you do that, do you mind if I just launch my final poll here? Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. So I'll do that in the meantime while Tim finds another question for you. Thank you so much for even the contributions in the chat here. I'm going to ask a question around involvement. You know, how involved have you been with Recovery for All thus far, and kind of where you see involvement going forward? If you're open to being engaged on the campaign, how so? We know we need capacity. If you're looking to help us out, if you've got a couple of hours, we can use that time. We can use that capacity. We would be delighted. We would be humbled to have you think about volunteering your time. You know, one of the things I didn't mention here, Tim, was that we have that school, the training school, if I can call it, by the Institute of Change Leaders that we've partnered with Co-op Housing Federation. We have 100 people plus in that program, in which some of you may be here today, going through a week-by-week process on capacity building and organizing in community. So, you know, you could be led by some of these folks who've kind of gone through this training. You can work alongside them. If you're interested in this cause, if you're interested in joining kind of this campaign, either online, offline, with a couple hours a week of your time, what we'll say is that we're going to try to create a structure that allows you to meet each other, hopefully have fun while doing it, and really try to double down on the unique asset that we have, which goes back to Tim's first slide, which is all of us. Our asset is not going to be a bunch of money. It's not going to be a bunch of glossy, you know, advertising or TV ads. It's going to be the fact that we have engaged people who speak on behalf of those that have had lived experience, those with marginalized voices, and the broader public at large in terms of their appetite for wanting some of these things. So I'll leave that poll open for a few seconds, and thank you so much for all your intent and effort to think about perhaps contributing some of your time and volunteering with us. So Tim, if we've got another question.
Yeah, well, Elaine made a comment in the chat that I think is really interesting. And Elaine saying that as a member of a lived experience circle, she wants to say that Facebook is not acceptable to their group, and they're very concerned about privacy. And so they use Zoom calls and other things to get together. So we'll have to. That's a good point, Elaine. I don't think we really considered or thought about that. We've seen lived experience groups working on Facebook and other venues, but we'll have to think about how we're connecting with people to make sure that we're sort of attending to that concern for sure. Zane, you were talking at one point about an app for the campaign that you've used that successfully in other election campaigns.
That's right. Yeah. So Facebook will be a starting point. It won't be the only tool. So thank you to that. I'll kind of bridge that and Elaine's comment as well, Tim. So yes, as it relates to ensuring we as a community, right, can talk with each other, can meet each other, can share content. As we evolve into this broader campaign, Facebook will be one of the tools. It won't be the only tool. Other things we've used have been relational organizing apps, internal communities that allow you to meet one another, to share content with friends, with family in a very easy way. So we've had apps like Outreach Circle, others that we've considered that allow you to do really interesting things in a very, very simple way to say, you know what, I like to get involved. I may not have a bunch of time, but if I'm on this app, it allows me to send a quick text to friends and family. It allows me to share a quick article. It allows me to fill in a pledge or a petition form or do something like that. And what we've realized is that has tremendous, tremendous value, not just to convince those around you, but to the folks that are making the decisions and the candidates that are hearing what you have to say in that very critical time. And that critical time, of course, being when they need your vote to get reelected. If they know that this is what you're saying in that lead up to that time, it just matters even more to them. So we want to ensure that we have that community of not just being able to get to know each other and meet each other, but that community that allows action to happen as well. So we're very excited to introduce that as part of this approach as well.
For sure. Now, I'm mindful of the time, Zane. Do you have a poll running now? You just want to go through it? I do.
I just closed it. So thank you so much to everyone who responded here. We're seeing, varying levels of engagement with varying extremely engaged leading the top. Would you be interested in volunteering? Majority of the people saying yes. Some don't know. We'll follow up with both of you. And then how would you like to volunteer? Online, offline, or both? So people committing to both of those things. What I'll do is we've got this information. We'll reach out to everyone after this call as we close this out. There's a few key items that I'd like to mention, Tim, if that's okay.
Yep.
We'll send you a copy of the deck that Tim and I presented today so you can have that. We'll send a video recording of this session, and then we'll also send the link to that group and a sign up page for others that you know. So I've got your intent of where you'd want to sign up. I'll follow up and we'll follow up. It might take a week or two for us to kind of get in touch base with you about opportunities, but we'll follow up about those opportunities. And as we move on to this next campaign, we'd love that engagement and that enthusiasm. And the final thing I'll add is today marks the sprint. This is where we start our sprint to the budget. So you'll expect to hear from us more on the Recovery for All side of things. That program is not done just yet. We need to get to that budget, see where we can get, see what sort of people power we can move to that budget. And then you'll see us kind of moving on to that next version of this very exciting housing campaign. So that's the final thoughts that I wanted to leave with, alongside saying, of course, thank you so much to everyone for their time today.
So I think we'll squeeze in, we've got a load of questions, like unfortunately way more than we were able to get to, but I'll maybe just take two more from our list, and apologies to those we couldn't get to. Tristan is writing from BC, where they're saying housing and homelessness is a major crisis and often a top election issue. There's a complex political landscape in housing advocacy, which goes beyond the sector, e.g. renters are a major force in pushing for engaging and preventing eviction and homelessness. So are there plans to engage renters? And the short answer is yes. We're looking at potential partners in British Columbia to help engage the larger advocacy communities there. But this is where all of you play a really important role, is reaching into the networks that you have access to and helping us connect with them. So to the extent that you can, connect us with them or them with us, or bring them into the fold, that would be really, really helpful. And that's what's so powerful about this people power approach, because you each have some really influential relationships. Raymond is asking, I'm sure we don't want to dilute the federal campaign, yet municipalities also have choices to make in how they utilize some federal monies and provincial dollars. Is there anything tied to this continuing campaign that can be used to influence and inform local campaigns? So Raymond, the long game here is we want to come out of a federal campaign with a movement, a housing movement, a homelessness movement that, you know, we have the capacity to eventually turn to provincial and municipal campaigns, right? If we have enough, you know, right now there's 22,000 members, imagine, you know, or 22,000 supporters. Imagine if this housing campaign mobilized 500,000 people and we were able to connect, expand the supporters of housing to that point. There, if we had the capacity, we would be able to, rally the members in Sault Ste. Marie or Kelowna or Vancouver or St. John's or Whitehorse, to turn that attention and use some of these tactics to move municipal politics, or even more importantly, move those provincial systems like child intervention that are projecting children into homelessness. I think there is a lot of potential, and in many ways, what we're doing is a test at scale to try and see what works and how it will work and the tactics of the work, and build the infrastructure and come out of it with a movement that is powerful and influential and mobilized and will be effective at federal, provincial, municipal, and territorial levels as well. So. Zane, I don't know if you have anything you want to add, but we're a little bit over time.
No, I wanted to just thank everyone for their enthusiasm and their commitment to this cause, and to hopefully our sprint right here, as well as the next iteration of this campaign. So Thank you so much for everyone's time and energy.
Thank you, everyone. Everyone who registered for this webinar will follow up with to give the slides and a link to the video. And by all means, do feel free to reach out to us. This is one of, I think, many conversations that we'll be having over the next months and hopefully years to come. So thank you all. Stay well.
Everyone.
Thanks for everything you're doing. We will be in touch.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Have a great day.